Rules in action. Rules that keep things going smoothly and fairly. Rules that help us get where we're going. Help us work together, play together, and live together. Of course, in small groups, we sometimes get along without rules.
But there aren't any loud noises, just the sounds of working. We call these work sounds. Listen.
When many of us play together, rules make the game. Rules help us play fair with each other, so all can enjoy the game. Rules that apply equally to all. It's up to each one of us to know the rules and follow them.
Why do you suppose this room is so quiet? Perhaps we can learn from the teacher.
At New York's Madison Square Garden, a City College quintet faces five fast and fancy red boots from the University of Oregon. It's the opening contest of an intersectional doubleheader, and New York draws 2 points worth of first blood.
And you know, we have found that knowing when to be quiet is a part of growing up.
16,000 fans watch the boys from the Pacific Coast as they try to stem the onslaught of City College fever. But it's all over when Silverstein shoots off the hardwood, decades the ball, and the ball game for CCNY 38-36.
Because a quiet room helps all of us learn.
How do you do it?
Well, each of us knows how to work quietly. That's very important.
But the evening sport is a long way from the locker room. In the second game, a team of Northwestern Wildcats is matched against St. John's University of Brooklyn. The lads from Illinois are off to a springboard start when Bob Coble eases the Helen into the basket to take the lead.
Do you think you could walk this quietly? Listen to this work sound.
But tribal warfare comes to the gymnasium as the St. John's Indians retaliate with 2 points. From now on, the game is touch and go, with 10 men helping to get it there. A beautiful display of teamwork, and Northwestern gets in the number column with sharp shooting Bob Coble doing the honors.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Learn the Game, where you learn if you've got an F for effort. And happy Father's Day to everyone. Today, we'll be talking about Len Bias, the what if surrounding him, and Politicus Rex's reason of why he's not a fan surrounding this topic. Before we get into that, Len Bias is considered one of the greatest what ifs of all time, with his unfortunate death after being drafted to the Boston Celtics in 1993. And what could have been? What could have been with... I'm sorry?
1986.
Oh, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyway. He was he was born in 73, right? Yeah. Anyway. He was, unfortunately died. And what could have been with that Boston Celtics dynasty. Anyway, Rex, how are you doing? And happy Father's Day to you.
Happy Father's Day to you. Yeah, newly retired, so I haven't done anything since close of business Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is this? How did Len Bias' death? How did it impact your life, and how did it transition you to not becoming a fan as you are famously known for?
Well, I mean, up until that point, I was a high school senior, and I was obviously into basketball and had studied basketball, was a big fan. The local teams, I'm from the Washington D.C. area. So I was a big Bullets fan, University of Maryland fan, Georgetown fan. My favorite player at the time was Patrick Ewing. And historically, I was a huge Wilt fan. And, I had, jerseys and the whole thing. I was a fan. And I had seen Bias play, not just at the University of Maryland, going to Maryland games, but I'd seen him play on the playground. I'd gone to courts where he was playing and got to actually, I'm standing 5 feet from him on the sideline watching him play. And it just, it was like, oh man, this guy, his shot was, his form was just impeccable. Everything he did, the fundamental form of it was perfect. Now, he was a weak ball handler, but he was a front court player. And back then, you really stayed to your, to the stereotypical mold of your position. So he was never asked to dribble very much, bring the ball up. He never did that. And that was by far the weakest point in his game. But once the ball was in his hand in the front court, he was dangerous from, 25 feet in. He could post up. He could go either way, right or left. He could play the wing. He could finish on the break. He could offensive rebound. He had a 3-point shot. It just looked like he was going to be the next big thing. And he was getting drafted, to the Celtics. So he was going to the championship team. The team that had just won the championship then drafted this guy. And it's like I remember there was an article, the rich just get richer. And it was talking about the Celtics having the MVP in Bird, who had just won his third consecutive MVP. They had just won their second title in 3 years, had gone to 3 straight finals, and now they get Bias. And it's just like, it's not fair. That was the argument was, and then literally 12 hours after reading that, he was dead. And it was a huge wake-up call. It was just how he died, the cocaine. And it just shocked everyone. I mean, everyone. People that didn't even follow basketball knew who Len Bias was and were just, appalled, just gobsmacked at the whole thing. The entire, everybody was. And then, the news started coming out. They started digging deeper and finding out what was going on behind the scenes. Everything started, falling into place. And then we found out the corruption and everything that was going on. And for me, it just, at that point, I was done looking up to, or even if you want to put use the word worship, I was done worshiping basketball players. I still loved basketball more than ever. The game. And the game will never let you down. But I was done as far as being a fan of any particular player or any particular team. They were all just, players on the chessboard to me from that point forward. Can recognize their abilities, what they bring to the table, their outrageous talents and athleticism and, their basketball IQs. But as far as actually being a fan and wearing their shoes or their jersey or anything like that, never, ever again. And that's where the whole I'm not a fan part of my title came from. And I just looked at basketball purely from a historical and from a learning point of view. I look at basketball and how it works and the strategies and everything the same way a scientist looks at nature. And that's all, that's how it's been ever since.
Was it just because you were such a fan of his skill, or were you a long-standing fan of Len Bias, or was it just the hype of having him come to the league? How long did you admire Len Bias? Also, welcome aircraft carrier. He asks, is Anthony Bennett, Larry Johnson, and Len Bias all similar playing style-wise?
No, not at all. Not at all. Len Bias was Dominique Wilkins with a consistent jumper. He had a 45-inch vertical leap. He was muscular. He was lean, 6'8". Larry Johnson was a ball handler. Larry Johnson, for those who never got to see him, the closest thing to Larry Johnson today is LeBron James. Larry Johnson could play guard at 6'8", 250, 260. He had the bad back though. So his prime was only 3 years, I think, three, maybe 4 years before he really started having back issues and it really diminished his athleticism. And he just became a support player. Some different injuries, but his career went a lot like Penny Hardaway, Grant Hill, those guys. But no, Bias was an absolute physical specimen. He was an avid weightlifter. He was a tremendous athlete. He was an athlete that made himself a basketball player. That's one of the reasons why I really liked him, because I started in track and field. And I had to make myself into a basketball player. So I sort of understood his struggle. That's why he did. That's why all of his stuff, he had such perfect form, because it was all taught. You look at Larry Bird's shooting form, or Reggie, Miller's shooting form. Guys like that, their shooting forms are natural. They don't have the kind of shooting form you'd teach anyone. It was just natural. Their game developed because they had skill from the get-go. Bias was taught. So his form was perfect because he couldn't shoot when he first started playing basketball. He couldn't dribble. He couldn't pass. It was all taught to him. We took this fantastic athlete and we're going to make him into a basketball player.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I know for me growing up, and I never really got too big into sports, but when I was playing as a younger kid, and at least I know during my time, I think it's changed quite a bit for kids playing sports now, is I played multiple sports, soccer, baseball, and then basketball primarily. And I think it's great for kids, especially growing up nowadays, to be multi-sport athletes. I know that the whole AAU not that it hasn't been around, but how people lean on just playing one sport all year round. I think that's grown a lot over the last 20 years or so. So I appreciate what you're talking about with Len Bias being a multi-sport athlete and then getting great at that. What's one thing that people should know about Len Bias that they can relate to nowadays? I know you talked about that he was kind of like Dominique Wilkins with a jump shot, but what kind of impact, since this is a what if episode, what kind of impact do you think he would have had on the game of basketball for the projection he had coming into the league?
Well, you can argue, if you study the 80s champions, you can argue that the difference between the two differences, really, between the Lakers and the Celtics was the Lakers had the third all-time great. They had Worthy. First, Kareem started getting old and then retired. Then Magic with the HIV and all that. But as Kareem aged out, Worthy, who was a longtime member of the team and played a support role, became the main guy and took over the offense as the main weapon with Magic. Celtics didn't have that. They had their front line, which was their strength, considered to be the greatest front line in basketball history. But once they all started getting injured at the same time, there was no young third guy that stepped up. That would have been Bias. How much longer would Bird and McHale have lasted if they would have had that level of backup to take minutes and lessen their wear and tear? It changes the entire outlook of the team's future. He doesn't have to be the next Larry Bird. He doesn't have to be the next Michael Jordan. He just has to be all-star level and consistent, which throughout his college career he was. So, personally, I don't think Bias would have been like, maybe he might have edged into the top 75 all-time list, but I don't think so. I think he would have been just below that because he did have a real problem with ball handling. And going forward as a young player coming out in 86, when you look into the 90s, the type of basketball that the league became, he wouldn't have had a problem with the physicality because he was a muscular, physical player. He was a finesse scorer, but he could beat you up too. He could play rough. It just wasn't what he preferred. But he could muscle you. But the difference is he was an old school forward in the fact that he needed a point guard to give him the ball. So he did have limitations that guys like Barkley didn't have. Like if you want to say what's the difference between Barkley and Malone, the two best power forwards of that generation. And really the difference is Karl Malone needed John Stockton. Charles Barkley could take the ball out of bounds or get a turnover and take it coast to coast. Len Bias couldn't do that. Karl Malone couldn't do that. Kevin McHale couldn't do that. So there's a difference. So he wasn't an all-around dominant player like Bird was. But he could get you foreseeably. I mean, everyone thought that Bias was going to be a career, he'd play 13, 14 years and his career averages would be like 18 and 8. In his peak years, he'd be 22, 23 points and 9, maybe touch 10 rebounds a game, maybe. I mean, I think he would have been right there below Dominique, right there with Worthy. Dominique gets higher grades because he carried a team. He carried a franchise for an entire decade almost single-handedly. So his stats were higher because he was always the number one option. Worthy started off like, a Havlicek or a McHale. And that was already going to be the role for Bias. That was already determined. People don't realize, maybe they do, I don't know, but Boston and Red knew who Bias was for years. He went to Red's basketball camp for, I believe, 5 or 6 years. He knew exactly who he was, and he used to play with the Celtics in the evening because the players on the Celtics would come to Red's camp as instructors. And it was a scam. Larry Bird would tell you, yeah, tuck your elbow in when you shoot, and they'd spend a little bit of time with the elite players. But the big thing was in the evening when all the other campers would go to their dorms there at the camp, Bias and a few others, I believe John Sally was also one of them, would play with the Celtics. Pickup games in the evening. And all the Celtics knew exactly who Bias was and exactly how good. And he would go head-to-head with Larry Bird in these pickup games. And Bird only had good things to say about him. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, must have been pretty good if Bird is saying he's good. The Lusankia says, who do you think is the best outlet passes center?
Wes Unseld.
Why do you say that? Can you give some background to that for the people?
He's got the greatest chest pass in history. You can literally go to Google and it'll tell you that. But no, that was Wes Unseld's thing. He could, once he got his hands on a rebound, he never lost it. You weren't taking it out of his hands once he got his hands on it. Now, he was short for a center and he was not mobile. So he would beat you with positioning. He'd get the ball and get it out. He would turn a 23-second defensive stand into grabbing a shot, taken in desperation at the end of the shot clock. He'd grab it, turn around, fire an outlet pass to half court, and now you're essentially on fast break defense after having the ball on a 23-second possession. And that was the real power behind the 70s Bullets that got to 4 NBA finals. That, obviously Bill Russell is right up there. There's a lot of guys that obviously were extremely competent of it. Every great center is competent at outlet passes. It's an essential part of the game that most fans don't pay attention to. But it's one of the most, it turns your defense into offense. And if the first pass is a great one, then your chances of scoring skyrocket. A lot of people don't understand that. That's why I like doing these shows where we talk about these sort of off-center topics, these tangents that are not talked about very often, because I don't think 90% of fans understand these things and how important they are. And when you look at a player, I was having a conversation on in a comment section yesterday where it just got so frustrating because the person I was chatting with would constantly drift back to the Jordan versus LeBron default. No matter where the conversation was going, if the question got tough or the answer wasn't what they wanted, the default defensive mechanism, well, he's better at it than LeBron. Or, yeah, but Jordan could do this. And that default setting for fans these days drives me nuts. I don't care about LeBron James. I don't care about Michael Jordan. I don't care about any of them. I care about basketball. I don't want to sit and watch a 10-minute highlight video of Michael Jordan. I want to go out on the court and make my own highlight video at the local playground against the guys. I'm a player. I'm not a fan. I'm an old broken down player at this point, let's be honest, but still, I look at the game through a player's eyes, not looking at what this player did compared to what that player did. This guy was a better scorer than that guy, and this guy has a higher PER than that. I don't give a fine whatever. I'm a player, man. It's a game to be played, not a game to watch.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is Bill Walton, Bill Russell, and Kevin Love in that discussion?
Well, Kevin Love, I didn't mention Kevin Love because he's a forward, but Kevin Love is probably the best forward outlet passer in history. That's why him and LeBron were so potent, because by having someone that could get a rebound in an outlet pass like Love, that gets – you're either going with Kyrie with the ball up one sideline with LeBron running the wing, or he's outletting it to LeBron and you got a 6'9", 250-pound guard charging up with a guy like Kyrie that can finish at the rim but can also just drop at that three-point line along with guys like Miller and those guys. That's what made those Cavs teams. People very much underestimate Kevin Love's impact. There's a reason why he's been in the league so long and why the management and coaches love him, and that's why.
Well, I thought LeBron carried those Cavs teams. Not that he had a good team to get to the Warriors, to the finals all those years on the Cavaliers, because Kevin Love, LeBron did it all by himself.
No.
He might as well have me on the court with him.
No, casual fans don't understand the connection. All right. John Stockton is an all-time great. He's the all-time career leader in 2 of the 5 major stat categories. He owns the record for 40% of the major stat categories. All right. He's not doing that without Karl Malone. That being said, Karl Malone retired as the number 2 all-time leading scorer. He's now sitting at number 3, obviously. And he wouldn't be there had it not been for John Stockton. The kind of player that Karl Malone was, he needed a fundamental point guard that could get him the ball in the same 3 spaces regardless of defensive pressure. That's what John Stockton could do. John Stockton could get the ball to the elbow and make a solid, perfect entry pass more consistently than any other guard in history. But for it to be effective, he has to have someone that can shoot a high percentage, play every night, and play 42 minutes a game under duress. So he needed Malone. The one thing that LeBron needs is a big that can rebound but also stretch a defense. That gets him an outlet pass 10 feet farther up the court, which is less wear and tear on his 250-pound body, makes him more effective. He becomes a fighter jet instead of a bomber. And then on the other end, on a set offense, it means that the stretch big can step out, bring the defensive center out. It means there's no shot blocker, there's no rim protector against LeBron at the rim. So he's contesting at the rim against guys that are either the same size or smaller than him. These are what add to LeBron's years, to his consistency, and to his all-time records. But he needs that kind of player. Okay? That doesn't make him any less of the main guy. It just some certain kinds of players have to have a certain kind of teammate to accent their abilities. And that's why every team LeBron goes to, they trade for a Chris Bosh, a Kevin Love, an Anthony Davis. That's why. Because how he plays, that is the kind of player that assists him the best. Jordan needed a guy like Pippen. He didn't. The argument I don't like is that when they say, well, Jordan couldn't have won without Pippen. Well, that's true, but it didn't have to be Pippen. It could have been Grant Hill in Pippen's spot. It could have been Tracy McGrady in his spot. It just had to be that type of player to go along with him. That really made him even that much more dominant. And that's how team sports work.
Absolutely. Aircraft carrier and basketball historian talk about Rasheed and Wilt as great outlet passers.
Yeah, but they were both, when it came to outlet passers, they were inconsistent. Rasheed was very emotional. And I saw firsthand, I had season tickets, him grab rebounds, have an open outlet pass, and for just a split second, had to demonstrate. That word probably doesn't mean anything to younger players, but to older players and coaches, to demonstrate means he would have to either talk smack, strike a pose, get eye contact with the dude he pulled the rebound away as a trash talking mechanism. Then he'd make the outlet pass. We don't need that. Just make the pass. And then Wilt, by his own admission, when he got older after he had the knee surgery, he would intentionally not make the outlet pass because he didn't want to run up the court. He'd make the guard come back to him and he'd hand it to him and then trot up the court because he didn't want to run at that stage of his career. So you can't call him one of the best. If you're thinking of yourself over the team in any capacity, you're not the best at a team sport.
Absolutely. What do you, for the power forward position, who do you think is the best scorer at the power forward position of all time?
Hayes. Not even close.
Elvin Hayes.
It's Elvin Hayes. There's no number two. It's Elvin Hayes.
Why do you think he's often forgotten about or not talked about in these discussions?
He just did his job. Country boy from Rayville, Louisiana. He just went out and did his job, made his money. Back then, it was work. And even athletes who were raised in working class families went about their job, went about playing basketball as it was work. And that's what he did. He didn't talk trash. He didn't do a bunch of commercials. He did do one or two, I remember. A nice enough guy. Got to meet him at a couple team meetings when I had, not meetings, but team greetings when I had season tickets. And, very personable, very great guy. But he just wasn't, he was more of a Tim Duncan than a Kevin Garnett. And for you Jordan fans who love talking about Rodman in the finals tied the record for offensive rebounds in a game in the 96 finals. I believe he tied the record twice. You know whose record he tied? Elvin Hayes. With, I believe it was 16 offensive rebounds in a game, in a finals game.
Wow. Basketball historian says, I feel you, Rex. I'm sick of hearing about Jordan LeBron. That's why I watch you and Dart, because you guys talk about everything. I just want to put.
I'm afraid when I was in the comment section yesterday with the person I was speaking to, I came off extremely harsh because it was just the conversation at the end of the day that it was exactly that. It constantly would turn back. We're talking about other things. And it would constantly turn back to Jordan and LeBron. And it was just so frustrating trying to have a basketball discussion. And it constantly goes back. To me, it makes no sense because it's like, playing Monopoly, but everyone's only trying to get Boardwalk and Park Place. Or you're playing chess, but both guys are only using their queens. It's I don't understand the constant fascination with just 2 out of 5,000 players. I don't get it.
I just wanted to add on the sidebar where I've started going on TikTok under the old channel's name. And I'm trying to pull Rex over there to do some streaming there just because of my issues with YouTube. But I actually was talking about Bob Cousy being greater than, or being the first or second greatest point guard of all time. And I had somebody literally come up, and when I say literally, I'm just trying to emphasize that this guy came up when I let people call in and screeched. He screeched because I had said that Bob Cousy was number 1 or number 2 and stood my ground on it. And it's just funny. But why I mentioned the TikTok thing is I'm going to be putting more content out there. There is just a new audience, and I'm able to put my face out there. So it's I'm trying to bring Rex over there as well in the near term. So just look out for that. But I just wanted to say, yeah, it's funny just how people, and over there especially, it's bad. Like, they really. Somebody said that Bob Cousy was carried by Larry Bird, which, yeah, just ridiculous stuff.
I had someone yesterday. I mentioned when they mentioned that talking about LeBron James having all these longevity records and how Jordan fans write them off as just being he only has a record because he's played so long. Like, there actually is still a skill. You still have to be able to do it. Guys get cut every year. You have to make the team. You have to get on the court. It's not just given to you. That's the challenge every year. And then accumulate all of that. But one of the guys mentioned, well, not only does he have all these records, but they also forget that in most of these records that he has, he's the youngest player to ever do. Like, he's the youngest to 5,000 points, the youngest to 10,000 points, the youngest to 20,000 points. And I just made the honest assertion that, well, yeah, because for most of the NBA history, players couldn't just go straight out of high school. I mean, you can legitimately argue that if Kareem had been allowed to come straight to the NBA out of Power Memorial, he'd still be the all-time leading scorer. Because he would have had 4 more years as a starting NBA center. Because it was widely understood when he was a freshman at UCLA that he was the greatest player in the world, not in the NBA at the time. And he was one of the 3 greatest centers in the world behind Wilt and Russell while in college. And that's all I said. And then the person brought up, well, all the rest of the top 5 were able to go pro other than Kareem. And I said, Kevin Durant and Karl Malone couldn't go pro out of high school. And the guy actually said, well, Kevin Durant isn't in the top 5, so he's irrelevant. Kevin Durant is number 5 all-time leading scorer. And he said that guys were able to go pro to the NBA out of high school since 1975. Malone just wasn't good enough. So anyone that has that lack of knowledge, that's 3 minutes of my life I'll never get back.
Well, yeah, and then, and the first to a lot of these things, if Wilt Chamberlain was allowed in the league, might have been him too, to get there, potentially. Again, it's hypotheticals with this conversation, but to the point is that there were all-time great scorers or all-time great players, period, prior to LeBron James that got to these numbers faster per time of when they were playing in the league. Their age just was associated differently because of when they joined the league. Um,
How many
Basketball
times have
historians,
I told you, man? How many times have I told you? Situation and circumstance.
absolutely. Stockton and Malone complemented each other, and that's what fans don't understand. They just say one of them needed each other just to discredit them. I think it's more just discrediting them. I think it's to also raise up guys. The whole GOAT debate thing with Jordan and LeBron. Oh, you don't need anyone. They just, everyone else is really just a sidebar conversation to these guys and their success on their team. I think it's really just trying for them to make a consistent argument for saying LeBron or Jordan's the GOAT. And that they didn't have any help.
It always kills me when they say, they don't have any help. Last time I checked, everyone on the team is an NBA player.
I can go out there and play, and LeBron would get to the finals.
It's not like the 56 Olympics, when Bill Russell showed up with one or two other college All-Americans and the rest of the team were semi-pro guys that played for, Jimmy's Petroleum. I mean, it's, they're all NBA players. They all grew up the best players on their high school teams, AAU, college, international competition. And then they get to the NBA and you work yourself to death. You do everything right for an entire season because you don't win a championship unless every member of the organization has a career year, from the travel secretary to the trainers to the players to the coaches. Everyone has to be on top of their game for the entire season to get to that point. And to do all that right and to have that history in your life and then be told, well, your teammate who's Mr. All Everything, he did it himself. That's got to be crazy. The only
This
reason
is actually
Hayes over Malone is because we don't have a true bearing on Malone because he was playing with another all-time great, giving him the ball every possession of his career almost. Elvin Hayes didn't have that.
Yeah. I wanted to add, Aircraft Carrier was talking about that they take their talking points from this other show called Player's Choice. I've never been able to watch that show longer than 3 minutes because it's just people screaming over each other and they just have the most asinine takes. And as an example,
about clicks today. If you got paid for how many truth bombs you dropped, most of these guys would just be in soup kitchens.
Oh yeah. Well, and I'll call this guy out in a negative way, and I less so dislike him versus his boss, but Johnny was on that show before the Player's Choice, and that's kind of his typical show style is just yelling the entire time. So, but I have this this comment highlighted because I was talking to fans, and this actually drove me to this Bob Cousy show I did the other day, is that they had SGA over Bob Cousy, and they said Bob Cousy was the 10th greatest point guard of all time. But the point is that they had SGA over Bob Cousy, who has won MVP and has been in the league, only a handful of years. Doesn't have any, he hasn't done nearly as much as Bob Cousy has done, and there is no hindsight kind of appreciation for him, if you want to put it as legacy. There's no legacy for SGA because he's still playing. So it's to be determined about how he's going to be looked at in that style of greatness. But yeah, they said that he was well above Bob Cousy. They said that Bob Cousy, other people were saying Bob Cousy shouldn't even be a top 10 point guard of all time, or considered a top 10
Cousy's a
greatest point
top
guard of all
10
time.
player of all time.
I agree. I think he's underappreciated for that. He is a top 10 player of all time. I think he is. I have him ranked as such. And when I've done my list, I think he's on the bottom end of it, but
Now,
he did so much for the game.
But like I said, situation and circumstance. Give it another 10 years, SGA very well may be in that category. But you got to give it time.
Yeah. Yep. The point is, it's not right now. Yeah.
Career. But what it is a lot of times with Cousy is that the vast majority of fans have absolutely no clue of Cousy's impact. I mean, when you look at basketball and what basketball means in the different demographics of the United States, people want to talk about Allen Iverson and how he's such a cultural figure off the court that adds to his resume as a basketball player, his influence on basketball culture, right?
Yeah.
Cousy was the first. Cousy is the one. He grew up in the streets of New York playing basketball and brought New York street basketball to the NBA. He's the one that did it.
Yeah.
There would be no quote-unquote modern basketball culture if it was not for Bob Cousy. There would be no millionaire players if it was not for Bob Cousy founding the Players Association. When he joined the Celtics, they were basically an expansion team at that point. 1950, I think it was.
Yeah.
When he left, he was a one-time MVP, a 6-time champion, 8-time consecutive, I believe, assist champion. And the team was the most dominant team in the history of American sports.
And a 10-time first-team All-NBA.
Yeah.
Let alone the All-Star appearances and All-Star MVPs.
But the Boston Celtics were nothing but an idea when Cousy came. When he left, they were the preeminent team in all of sports.
Yeah.
And yes, Bill Russell was the main reason why they reached that level. But remember, when Russell was a rookie and joined them, Russell was neither Rookie of the Year nor MVP. Rookie of the Year was Tommy Heinsohn, and Bob Cousy was the league MVP.
Yeah. Absolutely. Who do you think is the best fast break passer ever? I would think, since we're on the subject, I think Bill Russell's in that argument.
Fast break exclusively? I mean, the easy answer is to just say Magic and walk away.
Yeah.
But Jason Kidd, Jason Williams. The one thing that people forget about Jason Williams, White Chocolate, is he had all the playground fancy passes and everything, but if you look at his career assist to turnover ratio, it was exceptional. He didn't make many turnovers. When he did those plays, they worked.
Yeah.
I think you got personally, I want to put like I feel like I'm forgetting someone as a fast break passer. I really feel like I'm forgetting someone.
You didn't mention Bob Cousy.
No, because he's a point guard. That's what he's supposed to do. When I think of, and no, I do not include Magic Johnson as a point guard. Yes, he played point guard for the majority of his career. And when he played point guard, he was the greatest point guard. But Magic has always been to me a basketball player that chose to play point guard. Some guys like John Stockton, is a born point guard. Even though he played shooting guard in college, he was the leading scorer in his college conference 2 years in a row before going to Utah. Averaged over 20 points a game in college. But when pro coaches saw him play, they saw pro point guard. That was what he was going to be from the day he picked up a basketball. Magic Johnson could have never played point guard a day in his life. He still would be in the top 75 all time if he had only played power forward, if he had only played shooting guard, if he had only played small forward. He still would be one of the greatest players of all time if he had never played the point guard position. Very few players you can say that about.
Yeah. Basketball historian is talking about Kareem might have still had the record for most games played instead of Robert Parrish if he could have went pro out of high school like Garnett, Kobe, LeBron, etc. And then he follows up and says, player's choice, yells and screams. And then also there are passes that Kuzi did 70 years ago that today players haven't done. And Kuzi did those passes when the rules weren't loose like today's rules. What do you got to say about that, Rex?
Exactly. Well, exactly. I was watching a video yesterday morning, and it was showing like highlights of this past season, and literally 2/3 at least of the plays that this particular YouTuber picked as the greatest plays of the season wouldn't have even been legal basketball plays in any league, 30 years ago. And that's the difference in the rules. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. When I used to coach, when I used to do basketball camps, especially, because when you coach, okay, your team knows you, so. But when I would do basketball camps, I was young. I was in my 20s. And I looked even younger. And more than once, they thought I was a player at the camp and not an instructor. And I'm a little guy, little 5'9", 5'10" point guard. And I would always take these high school players that were 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", that the only thing greater than their natural ability at basketball was their ego.
Yeah.
And to prove a point to the other players who are looking at them like they're gods. And it's like, okay, he's just a kid who's physically matured more than you. Give it time, And I would get out there and I would challenge them. I said, let's play a game to 5. And they'd look at me and be like, seriously? So it's like, yeah, let's just play a game. Okay, that's what we're here for, right? We're playing basketball. It's a basketball camp. Let's play basketball. And I said, but I'm going to make 2 rules. And they always think I'm going to make rules to limit them. Yeah. I said, rule is no make it, take it. And I can only shoot set shot layups. And they don't understand what's going on now. Like, well, that's ridiculous. And I'd play them, and I always beat them. 5-0, 5-1, 5-2 on 5 set shot layups. Because if you use the fundamentals properly against a player that does not know defense, which no high school player knows defense, they haven't had enough time to experience defense yet. They all are great at offense. They can dunk, they can shoot, they can do all this ball handling stuff. None of them play post defense. And I
Yeah.
would smack them down and shoot set shot layups. And I would look at the other campers and I'd tell them, basketball is not about the athleticism. It's about understanding the game, what you're allowed to do and what your opponent is not allowed to do.
Yeah. Who do you think is the best floor general of all time?
Oh, once again, Magic jumps up there. Wow. By floor general, I think of, someone that controls the offense, make sure everyone's in their spots, make sure the plays that are called run correctly and are executed. I don't put Bird in that category because Bird did not play that way. Bird was not the floor general. That was Dennis Johnson. Bird moved better than anyone in and out of the flow of the offense and could move within the offense, within the natural flow of his teammates and find his spots and excel. That's different than being a floor general. The player that I modeled my game after, Kevin Porter, he was a great floor general. I'd have to go with Magic because Magic always made sure everyone was in the passing lane in the right place. Always made sure that, I remember seeing plays where he would point at Kareem and tell Kareem, he'd wave Kareem up because Kareem would post too close to the basket to where the weak side forward would have time to double team him. And I saw Magic in a game, this is my courtside seats, and Magic waved Kareem to take one step out. And the reason he wanted him to take one step out was so that the defensive power forward that was on the weak side that was waiting for the pass to come in so he could double team Kareem, then wouldn't have time to make the double team. And what happened was, because these are plays that are called, Magic put the ball to Kareem. Kareem started to turn to do a sky hook, saw the power forward come, and dropped a high pass off to the man he left for a weak side dunk. That entire play, now, I believe it was Worthy on the other side. I may be wrong about that. I believe it was Worthy. But Worthy gets the points. Kareem got the assist, but Magic made the play. Because he recognized what the defense was trying to do, and he got Kareem, who historically was greater than him at this point, and Kareem listened to his floor general and moved to where Magic wanted him, which created the proper spacing to get a dunk off the play. That's a floor general. Mark Jackson was another fantastic floor general.
No. What about from Casual Hoops Ed? Welcome, Casual Hoops Ed. For modern guys that think Jokic should be considered, what do you think about that?
He should be considered, but he's still playing, so you can't make a final decision. Oh, yes, my gosh, Rondo, aircraft carrier. Rondo, yes. Reason he was in the NBA was because of his floor generalship. Absolutely. God, how did I forget him?
The Lusankia says, my last one for today. Who do you think is the best player at making the correct basketball play, possession after possession, regardless of whether of what showed up in the box score?
My personal belief would be Bill Walton. Bill Walton. With his injuries, though, you didn't get enough highlights of it that this generation has any clue of exactly what he did. The closest thing, if Bill Walton If you want to say what would Bill Walton have been if he was healthy, look at Tim Duncan. I'd say Bill Walton and Tim Duncan.
Yeah. That's a hard one.
It is. That's brutally hard. And the thing is, you almost have to X out small guards.
Yeah.
When he put in possession after possession, because a small guard, depending on the defense and what your coach is trying to have you run, there's oftentimes when a small guard is, entrusted with making the first pass to initiate the offense, but then never touches the ball again. So he has limited impact on the final result of the play. And that's something that kind of takes small guards out of that equation.
I got an answer. LeBron James, because he said so.
No, LeBron James is up there. Definitely. He really is.
But my reasoning is because he said so.
The thing to do these days is to slam LeBron. But LeBron is absolutely in the discussion for that. But there's just been a couple plays, high-profile
it's just because he said
that I think takes him out of when you say the best at it.
Well, I'm just saying it because he said he always makes the best basketball play. I'm not.
You don't know how many times I see these polls online on YouTube that said, okay, who do you want taking the last shot? And it'll have Bird, Jordan, and Ray Allen or whoever. And I always type in the comments, me.
Yeah.
I want to. Because I'm not a fan. I don't want to watch someone else take the glory. I want to win. I want to hit that shot. And I put that all the time. Who do you want taking the last shot? I want to take it.
Yeah.
Well, Andre Miller's problem was he came through at a time when there were so many exceptional point guards that he just kind of got pushed down the list when really if he would have played now or played 10 years earlier, he would have had a much more high-profile career. He was just kind of lost in the shuffle of so many point guards of his type that played at that time.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about Jason Kidd?
Jason Kidd was a creator point guard. Okay, you have floor generals and you have creators. Okay, Magic is one of the extreme few that was both. John Stockton was a floor general. Steve Nash was a floor general. They took the coach's offense and they translated it from two-dimensional on a clipboard or a chalkboard, and they turned it into three-dimensional on the court. Jason Kidd is a creator. Bird was a creator. Where you get the basic premise of what we're trying to do, where we're looking, where we want our offense to run. But as the play develops, they see things that pop up spur of the moment and seize the opportunity. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's difference. Yeah. It's the difference between Brett Favre and Eli Manning. Eli Manning was fantastic at doing what Coach Coughlin wanted him to do. Running their offense and making the play that the coach wanted made. Brett Favre could go out there and the play could completely break down, and what the coach wanted isn't working through mental or physical error. The play just isn't going to execute, and he can make something of it. and find the right answer and get people where they need to be to make a play. That's what Jason Kidd could do on a basketball court. That's why you get teams like, look at the teams that he took to the finals. They were teams that if they had had anyone other than Jason Kidd as a point guard, they would not have gone to the finals.
Yeah.
He was the one that made the GM look great. You could argue if Jason Kidd doesn't go to New Jersey, then everyone is asking, today, why the heck were Kerry Kittles and Keith Van Horn taken in the first round?
Yeah.
Reason you know those names are because Jason Kidd.
Yeah.
He brought that team together because of his ability to take, when you look at the coaching, very traditional coach, but not exceptional as far as creativity. It was not a Pat Riley. He wasn't anything like that. And, it's I really think Jason Kidd is culturally known as, as J Kidd. Like most of Jason Kidd's fans don't even understand what was great about Jason Kidd. If that makes sense. They know the name. They know him now as a coach and all that and everything. But I don't think they really understand what Jason Kidd actually, what his extreme skill was. Because it wasn't an evident skill.
Really? Is Jason Kidd black?
Who cares?
Yeah.
Have you seen his paycheck? Jason Kidd is green.
Yeah. Chris Paul is another guy who gets a lot of crap, but he's a great decision maker too.
The problem with Chris Paul is everywhere he went, he was absolutely convinced, and this goes all the way back to college. He was absolutely convinced from day one, every time he walked in the locker room, that he was smarter than his coach. And ultimately, that was his downfall from reaching the absolute pinnacle of basketball history.
I think
3 times in his career, if he would have just shut the hell up and did what the coach said, he would have chips.
Yeah.
He had all the talent, all the leadership, all the IQ. He had everything, the defense. He had everything. But what he also had was an outrageous ego. In every locker room he walked in, he thought he was smarter than his coach.
This is I think a fair equivalent. I've never said it on camera, but with him being in as an individual, not with the championships, I think he's the most dominant point guard of all time because he would be awarded and acknowledged with the first team All NBAs, the first team All Defense in the same year, along with winning assist titles and steals titles in the same year on top of getting those awards. Yeah. So you can't get much more dominant than that when you're leading the league in the two things that statistically, the two things that are associated with guard play, and then getting the awards of saying you're one of the best players offensively and defensively.
But here's the thing. With a point guard, it's like a quarterback or a pitcher. All right? If the running back fumbles the ball, it's his fault.
Yeah.
Right? If a receiver drops the pass, it's his fault.
Yeah.
If the kicker shanks a field goal, it's his fault. Quarterback can do everything right. And if the team doesn't score enough points to win, it's his fault.
Yeah.
And that was Chris Paul. He would have phenomenal years, be first team All-NBA and obvious first team All-NBA. His team would get to the Western Conference Finals, say, and get to a Game 7, and the team would just look like it didn't show up. They'd be out of sync. You don't have to make the game-losing turnover. You don't have to miss the shot at the buzzer. If the team is not peaked at the peak moment, it's the point guard's fault.
Yeah.
And that's why Chris Paul is Chris Paul. Other than 2 or 3 specific points in his career, you could argue he had the greatest individual point guard career of any point guard in history.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, individually, yeah.
And some aircraft carrier says this is one of the biggest misconceptions about Jason Kidd. They used to call him Ace and Kidd because he had no J. Jason Kidd was California's all-time leading scorer in high school. He could shoot. He could shoot better than most of the NBA. But on the particular team that you're speaking of, they had players who were pure scorers, pure shooters, multiple of them. And he took his offense, scoring offense, out of the equation to make his teammates more productive. That's a Bill Russell tactic. And Jason Kidd, oddly enough, is one of the players in NBA history that's closest to Bill Russell in how he played. He did not give a flying flip about his personal stats.
Yeah.
Jason Kidd was the California high school's all-time leading scorer for quite a long time. He could score. He had a great matchup in college against, I think it was Gary Payton, in college, where one of them went for like 64 points and the other for like 48. Going head-to-head before, when they were getting ready to come out. I think Payton came out as a senior, though, and I think Jason Kidd was came out as a junior, I think. That was 30 years ago, so I may be wrong. But
yeah.
But he absolutely did have a J. He did not shoot them because, like in Dallas specifically, with Jason Terry and Dirk and the young small forward, gosh, I can't think of his name right now. Everyone always talks about LeBron choking in the finals and JJ Barea and all that, but it was actually this young, like second or third year small forward that was the one that was actually covering LeBron for the vast majority of the series.
Yeah.
And he got no credit. He got no credit.
Wasn't it Sean Marion that was doing it?
No, not Marion. Not Marion. I want to say Deshaun something, though. But in any case.
Stevenson.
Yeah, Stevenson, I believe it was. Actually played LeBron the most minutes and got no credit for it.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was Marion. I know that was going against what you were saying, but.
Well, they rotated. That's the whole thing. It's funny how commentators actually said it. Sports writers actually wrote it as it was happening.
Yeah.
The reason Miami lost that series was not because LeBron did whatever LeBron did or didn't do. They lost because Spoelstra was a new coach and he got worked by Carlisle.
Yeah.
Now, you say it now and LeBron haters go, no, it was LeBron. It was LeBron. Okay, you never lose because of one player. If one player has a bad series and you still lose, that's on the coach.
Yeah.
15 other guys on that roster, including Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, like Wade, Bosch. You don't lose because of one player. Carlisle totally worked Spoelstra. And I say it now, and everyone gives me hate. But you literally, can go back on YouTube and watch those games, and the commentators are saying it in the game. It was obvious. But that's not the narrative that they want to play. LeBron haters want to say he choked, and that's why they lost. And, you know.
Do you I don't know how much you followed with this year's playoffs, but just to give you kind of a brief example of what happened in the NBA Finals, is that the Spurs were often leading significantly in these games.
They have their point guard. They do not have a fortune. They do not have. If they had Tony Parker, even 40-year-old Tony Parker, they would have won this finals. Yeah. They should have signed Tim Duncan to a 10-day contract. Yeah. Because they had no steadying force. That was the problem. When you look at the plays Fox made at crucial times, you're not a championship team if those are the plays your point guard, your guard is. It doesn't have to be your point guard. It can be any position, but we're talking about this. If he's making those kinds of plays in those pressure situations, then you are not a championship team and you don't deserve to win it.
Yeah.
If they would have had, and this is where I don't understand, other than what I just said about Chris Paul, if they would have had Chris Paul on that roster, they would have won. Because that is the one thing that Chris Paul would bring.
Yeah.
With Wemby out there, he doesn't have to be where he always fell short in the Western Conference Finals, especially during the Clippers years there. There's like 2 or 3 years with Jordan and what's his name? Guy out of Oklahoma. Blake Griffin. Yeah, with those teams, if that same, CP3 was on, the Spurs, I think they win. I think it changes. Because here's the thing. This is what most people don't understand. What I saw was them chasing around Brunson a whole lot. Okay, when you get a guy that's on fire, you don't chase him everywhere. Because if he's on fire, you can't match his energy. You can't make yourself be on fire. You used to have a video game, basketball game that my friends used to play, where your little computer player there would hit like 3 or 4 jumpers in a row, and the crowd would go crazy, and a Marv Albert voice would come out and say, "He's on fire." Okay, if a guy's on fire, the worst thing you can do is chase him around the court because you can't match his energy. You're just going to tire yourself out, and it's going to get worse. You're going to get stuck in quicksand, and you're just going to sink deeper, deeper, deeper. What you do is you meet them at a point. Okay, and military people will understand what I'm saying. When you're firing at a moving target, you don't sit there and try and move your rifle and fire as they're moving. You don't do that. That's the same thing as chasing a player that's red hot like Brunson. You can't play that way. What you have to do is you have to determine the point, the nexus of the crucial point, the place that you want to hit them, and you sit there and you wait for them to enter your sights. You don't chase them moving your rifle. You'll never hit them. You select the point of impact and you wait. Same thing in basketball. You know where Brunson wants to take his shot from, so you just make sure you meet him at that point. You don't go chasing them all over the court, through screens, up and down, zigzag. You don't do that. You know where he wants to shoot from. You know his 3 favorite spots. You make sure there's a defender ready to jump to that spot when the time comes. An experienced point guard will know that. Experienced coaches will know that.
Yeah.
But Mike Brown finally got his due.
Yeah, but LeBron never played for a great coach. I know it's nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I think that
guys who became great coaches. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the time he played with them, he never had an elite coach. No. At the time. Players get better, coaches get better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spoelstra and Brown were young coaches when they had LeBron. They have become great coaches, but they weren't great coaches. And I know LeBron detractors will say, well, that's why they weren't great coaches. Because they had to deal with LeBron. They were able to become great coaches when they got rid of LeBron, and they were actually able to do what they wanted to do. All right, if you want to make that argument, I don't know what's going on in the locker room, in the offices. Maybe that's true. Just seems like a lot of conjecture for me, since you're talking about the most wildly successful people at the sport today.
Yeah. What do you think about this? I heard a comment. I think it was from his teammate. I don't remember if it wasn't J.R. Smith. It was the other guard that was on him with the Cavaliers. But he had said recently that one of the issues with LeBron with the coaching, he did say that he is a problem with coaches, is that the reason why that happened is because he got all the money straight out of high school.
They never straight out of high school. And I would agree with that to a point. I would absolutely agree with that.
Well, that he didn't play for a coach in college that where it's where they cut it off. And I've never played in college or anything like that, but his point was, hey, he really just had full reign over that high school team, and then he went straight into the NBA and was lauded as the next big thing since sliced bread.
Yeah. But that's also happened with other players in the past, and they weren't like that.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying this. Yeah.
No, you got to have the right people. And look, this is always my argument. This is what people don't understand when I say the watered down 90s. When I talk about the watered down 90s, it doesn't mean the teams at the top were not the best teams. They obviously were. It does not mean that the talent at the top was less than other eras. It wasn't. They were fantastic. What it changes is it changes individual stat numbers slightly, okay? It changes win-loss numbers for your team slightly, and what it does is it just assumes everything is a constant. When you go from 23 to 29 teams, but at the same time, expand rosters from 12 to 16. What you're doing is you're letting in players that the year before were not good enough. That's a fact.
Yeah.
The player that was the last guy cut last year is the first guy you call when they expand the roster. Right?
Yeah.
Because he's already been to one of your training camp. He's already gone through your plays. You already know him. Your doctors have already checked him out. You've already dealt with his agent. You've watched him before you drafted him the year before. So he's the guy you go and get. But he wasn't good enough to be in the NBA last year. He was cut. Well, we expand teams. We expand rosters. Now he's in the league. That's a lesser player. So at some point in time, when he's on the court, if he's playing against the other team's number one, that other team's number one has an easier challenge. He's playing, maybe it's only 2 minutes. Maybe it's 6 minutes. Maybe due to a hamstring pull, it's 18 minutes. He's playing against a guy that 365 days earlier was not good enough to be in the league. So he scores one more basket than he would have. So instead of scoring 28, he scored 30. Right? Now, historically, that makes a difference. How many 30-point games does this great player have? He has one more because he played against a guy in one game for 6 minutes that the year before wasn't good enough to be in the league.
Yeah.
That's how watered down works. But how it works off the court is when you expand from 23 to 29 teams, you're just automatically assuming that we're going to find 6 more competent head coaches. We're going to find 6 more competent owners. We're going to have 6 more competent GMs. There ain't. These are skills learned.
And you mean as competent. And you mean as competent, right? Because it's not like these coaches don't have potential. You're talking about experience.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But that's why the 90s were watered down. It has nothing to do with the players at the top, in the teams at the top. There's nothing changes with them. They were the established dominant teams with the all-time dominant players. That's not where watered down affects anything. It affects at the bottom level. The lesser players. The new coaches. Look at who was the first head coach in Charlotte Hornets history.
I don't know.
Dick Harder.
Okay.
Tell me his resume.
Oh, I didn't even know it was him.
Exactly.
I don't know who he is. Yeah.
Minnesota Timberwolves, their first head coach in their history. Who was it?
No idea.
Bill Musselman.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you see, that's what I get. Okay. Who was the first starting center for the Miami Heat, their inaugural season? Who was their starting center?
I don't know that one.
Ronnie Cycli.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for an expansion team, Ronnie Cycli wouldn't have been a starter, and in 3 years he wouldn't have been in the league.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for the expansion of the NBA.
Yeah.
Okay? That's where it changes history. That's where it changes stats. That's where it changes legacy. That's why you can't argue player for player, coach for coach, team for team. You can't argue that stuff, era for era. You can't do it because it's not a level playing field.
Yeah. You only do it in the time that you're competing.
Exactly. And then instead, what I would tell people is don't focus on the player versus player. My dad can beat up your dad BS. Learn the game. Learn the game.
And that's something. So I don't. Whenever I do these debates, I don't talk about who would win in a game or who was better. I use the term greater. So when you get a guy like Bob Cousy who had 8 assist titles versus someone else who didn't have 8 assist titles, I just said he had more dominant seasons as the best assist player in his time. And for me, in that specific topic, without going down the rabbit hole of like how I calculate these things, is that I think it's fair to say that he, behind John Stockton, was the most dominant assist player, assist players to get scoring ever in that order. So it's John Stockton, and then it's Bob Cousy, because it's how they competed in their time. They did it better than everyone else in their time.
Do you want to know how the flow went? And this is the biggest thing. When you're talking about a game, you have stagnant games, right? Which are, board games, poker, stuff like that. When you're dealing with moving games, which is sports for the most part, team sports, what you're talking about, there's an ebb and flow. And if you want to get twice as good at basketball tomorrow as you are today, try to comprehend and understand the ebb and flow of a game. A game is water, okay? And it's flowing from the opening tip to the final buzzer. There's a flow to the game. And different things, from the refs to a player getting hot to injuries to coaches' decisions, will affect the ebb and flow of a game. And the team that plays within their comfort zone is going to win 99.9% of the games. Okay? That's why it's always you want to inflict your authority on the game. You want to make the other team play your pace. Because if you can play at your pace, your chances of winning skyrocket. If you're in your comfort zone and the other team is out of theirs. So going back, since we're talking floor generals, point guards, if you go all the way back, it starts essentially with guys like Slater Martin. He's the biggest, Slater Martin, but you have others, Andy Phillips. We just did a
Bob
show
Davies.
on, gosh,
Bob Davies.
Bob Davies. These are the guys that started it. Then soon after that, Bob Cousy, they come in as the first generation of what coaches called point guards. The guys that are at the point of the attack, the guy that initiates the offense, that gets everybody set like a quarterback, gets everything organized, and gives the first pass. This is what we're running. It goes from that, which means you're a guy that controls the ball, doesn't make turnovers. You're a capable passer, and you're durable. You can be depended on physically and mentally. That was the job. Then Bob Cousy comes in as the point guard template, but the dude had crazy athleticism and scoring ability. This dude is doing all the passing that these guys are doing, all the setup, all the point guard things, but he's also putting in over 20 a game in an era before the shot clock. Okay? That's like 30 a game now. That's where the step up comes. He saw what everyone wanted, and he took it the next step up. That's why he's remembered. Then you say, okay, we need this guy, this triple threat that can play D, pass, and score. We got Bob Cousy. He's 6'1". Then along comes Oscar Robertson 10 years later. Can do everything Cousy can do, but he's 6'5", 220. He's a rock. Can't push him out of position. If he wants to get to a spot on the court, he's getting there, and you can't stop him. And he can score 30 a game, and he can get you 10 assists a game, and he can rebound. That's the added dimension. He's bigger, stronger. Now you got rebounding coming out of your point guard position. That's something that was brand new. That's what everyone tried pushing. That's what everyone tried going with. Then you jump up and you get a bunch of 6'4", 6'5" guards, right? And then the insane happens. Here comes a 6'9" guy that can do everything Robertson could do. Robertson was 4 inches taller than Cousy. Now Magic comes, he's 4 inches taller than Oscar. And this is mind-blowing to the people in the sport. Breaks every mold. We have to rethink the game now. We got to figure out what to do. If you notice, after Magic, there were pretenders. Penny Hardaway, guys like that, guys that were 6'7", 6'8", that tried to play point guard. Their bodies couldn't hold up. Injuries. Couldn't do it. They fall by the wayside. Then they figure out in the modern game, spread out offensives, fast breaks, getting up and down the court. You recognize, okay, Magic was an anomaly. There is no other. Let's stop looking for the next Magic. There isn't one. What worked before? 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" point guard that's strong, fast, doesn't make mistakes. Here comes Jason Kidd. Here comes Nash. Here comes, that group. And essentially, we've stayed in that same mold ever since. Going all the way back to what used to work is now working again. The game doesn't change. They change the rules to make it more palatable for the viewer, but the game doesn't change.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's a great rundown of all of that. Hey, Rex, I got to get...
Tarzan Cooper, come on now, Eric. He was a center.
What about...
Tarzan Cooper was one of the first post centers. He was the same size as Oscar, though. Now that you mention it, okay, all right.
Who was the great... I forget his name right now, but you always mention him. The great guard rebounder in the 50s.
Gola?
Yeah, Tom Gola.
Tom Gola,
Yeah.
one of the greatest basketball players who has ever lived, ever stepped foot on earth. Nobody knows his name anymore.
Yeah.
He's still, 75 years later, he's still college's all-time leading rebounder. He played shooting guard in the NBA, guys.
Yeah.
But he's the all-time leading rebounder in college history. Still, 75 years later. That should be a record that is on everyone's tongue. That should be something that's right up there, with Wilt's 50 points per game, John Stockton 14.2 assists a game, Wilt's rebound totals. Tom Gola, 6'4.5", played shooting guard and small forward in the NBA for a Hall of Fame career, was College Player of the Year over Bill Russell, and is still the all-time leading rebounder in college basketball history. And he gets no recognition. One of the truly great players. How great of a player do you have to be an absolute rebounding machine and then step up to the next level and completely change and become a Hall of Fame guard?
Yeah.
How many of you guys can do that on a playground? How many of you can go out on a playground and dominate rebounding the ball and then go play at another court and switch and play shooting guard and be the best guy out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's real world
impressive.
Yeah.
But Rex, I gotta get going. I want to thank you, as always, for coming on and wish you a happy Father's Day, and happy Father's Day for everyone that came and watched. And thank you for your participation. Basketball historian, aircraft carrier. They're not pulling up the older ones, but I think Casual Hoop said was in here, and then the other guy that I haven't seen. But yeah, thank you all for coming in today. Rex, you have any last words for the people?
Well, question for aircraft carrier. The Harlem Globetrotters were always a novelty act, but because there was no money in professional basketball, Abe Saperstein was able to recruit the greatest players in the world to play for his novelty act because they made more money than the pro leagues. Once the pro leagues started making real money, then they stopped getting the best players. But the best players, it was in the 60s when Oscar Robertson and Pistol Pete Maravich both refused to play for the Harlem Globetrotters. Wilt did play for the Harlem Globetrotters. And there were NBA players in the 70s that when they retired from the NBA and ABA went and played for the Globetrotters. It's always been a novelty show. They were never a proper basketball team that played in a professional league. They were always a barnstorming novelty act that played their type of basketball. But they were the best basketball players in the world at one point in that team because Saperstein paid them more than the pro leagues would pay.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Nothing further from you, Rex? Nothing for the people?
Nope. I'm taking my kids to an 80s arcade.
Nice. All right. Everyone, learn the game and have a great day.